Alright, now in this next tutorial, we're going to work on positioning the links. So we're going to start with this, and we're going to end up with the links on this side here. Okay, it has a border around it, has another kind of a translucent area with curved borders here. Okay, and the tutorial after that we'll talk about span tags in HTML, and we'll talk about the hyperlinks. Okay, so I guess the first thing we're going to do is we need to learn a little bit more about positioning. As I mentioned before, positioning in CSS is, to me, one of the hardest things to understand. So what I want you to do is go to Google, alright, and I want you to go to I want you to search for CSS 10 steps positioning. Alright, and you'll see a website called barelyfits.com. Click on it, and I want you to go through this tutorial twice. Alright, it's a very short tutorial. It shows you some coding, and it shows you what that coding looks like. Alright, and then for each one it's going to explain all the different positioning types. Now if you're like me and you've been using CSS for a while, I went through this tutorial, I'm still confused about positioning. It's really tricky. But by the end of this my lesson series, I hope that you're going to understand it. And to me, you're not going to understand it unless you actually go ahead and do it. Okay, so go through the tutorial twice. Keep in mind that you're not going to be an expert just because you went through the tutorial, and then we'll go ahead and use it. Okay, and I'll offer explanations along the way. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to look at the HTML document, and then we need to see where the links are, how I arrange it. Now remember, you're not allowed to touch this HTML document. You can look at it, but you're not allowed to modify anything in it. So we see here that we have one main div here. You notice that this div is touching the very edge of the document here. Alright, it is the parent div, the superior div, okay, the super div. Okay, remember that div is basically like a text box, so that encompasses basically everything in the whole document. Alright, it ends right down here. Okay, so you notice that inside this main div, inside this big div, okay, is a sub div, or a subordinate div, or a child div or text box called links outside, and subordinate to that is a third one, okay, called links inside. So we have an outer div, a parent, a child div or text box, and another child text box within that one. Right, so that's a hierarchy. So you notice here that the ID here is links outside. So I'm going to copy this. Alright, and I'm going to bring this into my CSS file here. I need to start to define some CSS coding. So in here, okay, I'm going to make a comment. I'm going to call this links, positioning the links. Okay, so you see that the coding in green, it means that the computer is going to ignore it. It's a code, it's a comment, it's like a sticky note. It's like a note to self. So I'm going to go number and then paste, oops, not a dollar sign, number, and then paste this, open squiggly bracket, close squiggly bracket. Alright, now I'm ready to do some positioning. So now before we do the positioning, let's take a look at the finished product again. You notice here that that we're using borders. Okay, so after you do this 10 steps, learning the 10 steps here, go back to Google. Alright, okay, here we go, and then I want you to go site. We want to search within w3schools.com, and we want to search for CSS borders. Alright, so click on that. Okay, go through this tutorial, and I'll show you all kinds of cool stuff about how to make a border work. So after going through that tutorial, we're ready to start. So what we're going to do is the outside box is going to be the box with the border. Okay. Now we're gonna use absolute position. Position absolute. All right. What that means? See if you can wrap your head around this. What absolute positioning means is that we're going to actually, let's take a look at what W3 Schools says about position. So let's go back to here, Google W. All right, we're going to go to site W3 Schools, cs.com, CSS position. Okay, so in here, okay, an absolute position element is position relative to the first parent element that has a position other than static. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, well, let's look back in here. So this is the position, it's absolute position to the first relative div, okay, that is not static, which is this one here. The main content is the parent one, is the first relative one, okay, that is not static. Let's just check that it's not static. So let's go to main content, and nope, it's not static, it's fixed. All right. So that means that this links outside now is position absolute position relative to the main content div. Okay. So what we've done is we set this position in absolute to or relative to the main content. Where this is confusing is that we also have in here, we also have here relative positioning. So using the relative associated with absolute, see that relative absolute, it gets very confusing. Okay, but just bear with me. So we're going to position that absolute. Now normally you wouldn't have these numbers and you would have to kind of guess at this, but I kind of know the numbers we want. So we're going to go width. What is the width of this div, or what is width of this text box? I'm going to go the width 150 pixels. Okay, and also I also know the padding. Okay, padding. Again, you would normally have to experiment 10 pixels. Okay, and 20 pixels. 20 pixels. So the amount of space, the border around the inside of the text box is going to be 10 pixels and 20 pixels. All right. Now, because I went through the border tutorial, I know how to make borders. Okay, and you can see here that in the files that I gave you the actual I gave you the border. So we're going to use this file here. In fact, we're going to use this file here called border.png. So let's make use of that right now. So in here, okay, I'm going to go border image. Okay, where did I get that from? Again, if you go back to the tutorial, you'll see border image here. Okay. All right, border image. Right, URL border.png. Okay, I'm gonna go border width. Okay, now you know something funny here. I'm glad I made this mistake. Now, why is this kind of a light gray? This is light gray. This is light gray. So these are the properties, and these are the values. But this is not light gray. Isn't that weird? Okay, why is this property not light gray and these ones light gray? Ah, because I forgot this one here. There we go. That looks right. So we use the color coding to help us to fix, to locate problems. If you see something like this, Well, that's weird. These properties are gray and this one isn't. Missing a semicolon here. Okay. There you go. Put a semicolon in here. Okay. Now I'm going to go border width. Make it 15 pixels wide. Okay, now let's take a look at what this looks like. Let's go back to your page here. Go back to your cookie jar. Oops, this one. And refresh it. Okay, so let's refresh it, and you can see that nothing happens. Okay, now what's going on here? Now you notice here that, okay, again, why is this different color than this property? Well, we're missing the dash here. Alright, now it's the same color. Now let's go back here and take a look what it looks like. Not quite what we want. Doesn't quite look like that yet. Alright. And this is not positioned correctly. So we need to fix a few things. What do we fix first? Well, since we're working on the border, let's fix that first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the border, I'm going to add a few more properties up here. Okay, so the border image, I'm going to make it 25 pixels, 25 by 25 pixels, and I'm going to make it round. Alright, so add a few more values here. So 25 pixels by 25 pixels and make it round. Now let's see what that looks like. Okay, getting a little closer. Now it's not in the right position. That's a bit of a problem. So what we'll do now is we'll move it into position. So now this div or text box has a sub or child text box, okay, called links inside. Links outside has a parent text box or div called main content, in which we said that it's absolute. We said that it's absolute positioning. Okay, it's defined as absolute positioning. Now we know main content. This is fixed positioning, and we know that if you remember a few videos ago, we made it move in from the left 50% of the screen. We made it 800 pixels wide, and then 800 divided by 2 by half is 400. Okay, so we pulled it back halfway. That puts the 800 pixel wide main content text box or div right smack in the middle of the screen. Okay, and we're going to move this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to top. Okay, I'm going to move it 10 pixels down from the top, not from the top of the screen, but top of the main content div. I'm going to move this left 35 pixels. Okay, px. Normally you would have to experiment with these numbers to find the right one. They try different numbers and see what looks good, or you can use a ruler, of course. You can plan everything out perfectly. I've never been organized enough to actually pull that off. So anyway, so let's take a look what this looks like now. Okay, there we go. So we're relatively set. Okay, so we got things in position. It looks kind of like what we did. And we'll fix the spacing here in a minute. All right. So I think that's enough for now. And then in the next tutorial, we'll work on getting the this text box working. So we're going to work on the child class. Sorry, that's programming. We're going to work on the child div or text box to this one here. So links outside is a parent text box to links inside. So we're going to work on this text box or this div in the next tutorial. Okay, talk to you later.